will be your first pick. And that makes things a little more complicated, but it opens up the conversation. Tiamat, which is usually a must-ban for whoever's second pick, against the Valkyries is almost always something that people let through.
And Valkyries, I'm not sold that they would necessarily be able to utilize the full extent of some of those priority pressure picks like the Tiamat that you just mentioned, simply because they are dealing with an entire team on European ping. It's not the same as just having like one or two members, even as much as three on a single roster with ping disparity. When everyone is suffering from the same detrimental factor, it does become, I think, more problematic to try and run some of those niche-specific comps. And Tiamat, while I wouldn't expect the Bolts to want to leave that god open, I have a feeling that the Bolts might want to lean a little bit more towards staying locked in on just preventing Johnny from getting a nice priority pick for himself.
I was going to say, forcing Johnny onto weird picks has been kind of the nomenclature, at least it feels like in Phase 2. Most of what we've seen will be like, okay, we're going to ban your Loki, your Kali, Bakasura if we feel like it. Eventually we're going to get it to the point where all you're playing is Apollo Jungle, and sometimes it looks okay, in fact, for the Johnny. But as of right now, it's Odin, Yamoja, and the Tiamat ban from the Valkyries from your first pick. On the other side, Osiris, Raijin, and we're waiting for the last one to come through. Definitely feels like a couple of comfort bans from the Bolts to make sure they limit the, I guess, capabilities of the Valkyries alongside that Artemis that just comes through. But the Tiamat being banned by the first pick team, I think, is even more of a showcase that the Valkyries don't want to play it.
No, if Zeros wasn't having to deal with that European ping factor,
he'd be all over it.
He would be all over it in a heartbeat, and couldn't blame him in the slightest. Instead, it's going to be the Gilgamesh. We've seen this pick very often being leaned towards whenever it's open. However, on the responsive side, Bolts, they kind of have their pick of the litter. There's Amir, there's Fafnir, there's Fenrir. All of those have been central or priority picks here, but instead it's going to be the Morgan Le Fay with Tiamat not in the discussion any longer. Morgan Le Fay going to be prime pickings here for the Olympus Bolts, and that is going to, I think, apply a little bit of pressure onto the Valks here, because they're going to need something that Zeros can actually have a little bit of survivability with, and I think it's mostly just looking for clear from range that would probably be best suited for the Valhalla Valkyries, because if you have to get too close into Morgan Le Fay's range of execution, you're normally not going to have a good time.
Yeah, and along with the Fenrir, it's pretty easy to guide someone directly into her line of sight, so it makes things a little more complicated for the Valkyries. But it is worth noting this Gilgamesh, as much, well, I say it's a strong pick to take away from Lasbra, but he gets the Fenrir, which is maybe just as strong, if not stronger for him, so it feels like a win-loss in the same way. I guess it'll be fun to watch how that works out, because Johnny hasn't gotten to play it a whole lot. He's gone to his Tsukiyomis quite a few times. He's obviously like the Loki I had mentioned earlier, but this Gilgamesh, especially against Morgan Le Fay, you'd think it's going to be helpful.
Well, ideally, you'd want it to be helpful, but there's a little bit of the range aspect that I was kind of hoping to see here, and it introduces some nice control. I like the double root capability between this Discordia and Terra. I think that pairs very nicely, and also Discordia could pose some issues for that Fenrir, whether it's for jungle, whether it's for solo, or support. It's a nice flex pick option for the Bolts, and we might get a little bit more of a clear indication based on this third pick option, but there's the Amir that I was kind of banking on the Olympus Bolts to take. Priority went to the Fenrir, of course, but Fenrir and Amir is certainly a very fearsome front line to have to deal with for the Valhalla Valkyries. But again, I do believe that Discordia can be one of the better mages in terms of just keeping those melee range execution type gods like the Fenrir and Amir at bay.
And the, I guess, better news for that Discordia is like Ymir, Fenrir, well, Fenrir has a jump, but Morgan Le Fay, not as easy, like much easier to maybe lock down in that strife. So maybe that CC is going to be helpful. Same thing for Terra, as you had highlighted. And we had seen it, we've seen Morgan Le Fay drop a couple of times now in some of these matches, and a lot of it was, at least last week, more dive-oriented. Let's get back behind them. Fenrir and Ymir don't like to let you do that too much, though, Taco. I don't know how well they're going to be able to get back there. Keep it up to date on the bans, though. Serket taken away by the Bolts alongside a Loki, some more Johnny-centric bans. And then on the other side, Haddix seems to be the target with a Guan Yu ban, I wouldn't be surprised if it was another one. I guess King Arthur's still available. I mean, that's something else they've been going to quite often, although he keeps getting hit with nerfs. At some point, he's going to have to disappear.
It could be the Kakolin as well. We did see Haddix take Kakolin very recently, but I'm mostly keeping an eye on the Valkyries in terms of counter initiation, because their initial draft right now, Gore, kind of leads me to believe that they're expecting the Bolts to be the ones to jump first, and for good reason. When you see a mirror, when you see the Fender and the Morgan Le Fay, you have to assume that you're going to be the ones getting initiated on. But Gilgamesh, Terra, again, I think that both of those gods do an incredibly great job at just keeping the direct space around them under control. And one more time, the root presence, I think, could be very problematic here. And I think that's why the response from the Bolts now is going to be Barracuda on this Cupid pick. And again, I think that Fields of Love, just being able to try and counteract some of that AoE presence from the Winds of Shamash and from Terra, it could be really important here.
Now, I just want to ask you, because that Heimdall ban comes out, the Bolts, like, Barracuda is not even the top 4 hunters that I think of when I think of Heimdall. So is that either matchup specific? Like, he's played it twice this year.
Let him break out the Barra puddle, okay? And just wait. You don't know what that man's got planned.
He's got, well, you know what? I trust that at this point. Look, they're 6-0. They can play whatever they want, but it just feels like such an interesting ban to me. And I don't know what I guess, like, where that comes from. I mean, Cupid, especially now, like, Jingwei, Kakulin, like, is Heimdall better into this pack or into this draft that the Valkyries have, or does Cupid and I guess any of the other hunters just not match up the same way?
It's more so just the fact that the Bifrost is just particularly problematic, I think, for a team like the Valhalla Valkyries, because one of the primary issues that the Valks have had so far in Season 8, Gore, is just their capability of staying grouped and target focused on the same candidates. I think that this team oftentimes tends to get a little bit lost in the sauce and disjointed throughout some of their team fight engagements. So with the Jingwei, with the Kakolin, I think it's going to be a lot easier for the Valkyries to potentially just corral the Bolts into one specific area when the Bolts are looking for their initiation.
The word scintillating that you used.
Miff, Barracuda's on the Cupid this time, and I think Gore brings up a pretty interesting point there on the desk. We've seen a lot of variety, or we've seen some variety from Barracuda. Cupid one that I expect he's able to play pretty well here. Him and Jake, you get Ymir, you get Cupid, potential maybe for some pressure here up against Terra and Jingwei.
Yeah, I think so. Barracuda should be able to clear out the wave. If you remember back in Season 7, did get a 25% damage boost to minions, and he's able to use that immediately. If you're able to explode the minion on first hit, that stun is going to apply in an AoE. I like it. I think Cupid is a little bit slept on here in Season 8, but he doesn't utilize the bow build as well as some of these other hunters, so I'm excited to see how Barracuda decides to build it out.
Agra brought up a good point on the waiting room earlier today, where it feels like the meta starting to shift around these duo lanes, and that's an area I'll hold my thought as Haddix maybe getting soloed out by Ducky, and Haddix able to get beneath the Tier 1 tower to safety. And this is a matchup, Miff, I believe, if I remember correctly, you've talked about King Arthur up against Kulkullen. Oftentimes it kind of feels like a coin flip, just whoever's playing the lane better.
Yeah, pre-5 coin flip, but maybe slightly favored towards Kakullen because he has that rage transformation. Your auto attacks just swing so hard, but Ven in trouble.
Oh, Ven has to leave here, but the strife is great from Zeros. Barracuda gets a kill on the left. Hasbro makes his way underneath the Tier 1 tower. This was some of the pressure we thought we might see. And talking about how the duo lane for the Valkyries has had some struggles, it's where the Olympus Bolts are able to strike back, but the 2v2 in the mid lane goes great for Johnny and Zeros.
And First Blood does go the way of the Valhalla Valkyries. Yep. Good for them finding that bounty early on. And one of the weaknesses of Morgan Le Fay, just shown a little bit early here, it's that lack of mobility and Johnny's the lockdown of Discordia.
Johnny's behind Haddix here, who will make his way to the tower, but not far enough. And Ducky finally capitalizes on the damage that has been put onto Haddix in that lane. Team that has been the kings of early game pressure. A lot of it funneling through this duo lane here. Now we're going to get a look back at how Barracuda picked up his kill.
Just a great target selection with the heart bomb. Catches him out off the back of a blink-in freeze.
Just feeling good about that trade.
Yeah, we saw Jake actually try and do exactly what I was talking about. Drop the wall to block that double dash. Had he landed that, Raffer's life is forfeit. But either way, pressure going the way of the bolts. Might as well look towards this purple buff invade. And the Valkyries know about it, but they're just letting it go.
Yeah, there's not much the Valkyries can do. Maybe a counter punch back. Johnny has 1 level lead over Lasbra. Another double freeze from Jake. And on the targets, I don't have beats, but there's still an airstrike for Emilito, who will fly on away from this fight. But Zeros is rotated in, and he'll help out Johnny in picking up the Valkyries' 3rd kill of the game. This is maybe the most pressure we've seen the Valkyries have in the early game. At least they absorbed the pressure that was put on.
It's a full level lead already for Ducky inside the solo lane, who's elected to go for a little bit more damage with this Sundering Axe Fighter's mass start.
Lasbra's in the solo lane as well. Ducky gets stunned down. Lasbra does not have his ultimate, so it's going to be brutalized to close the gap. Ducky with the double knockup, but Ragnarok comes back up just in time, and now Lasbra strikes back. And this is exactly what the doctor ordered for Haddix, a route back into that
survivable lane until he gets a couple more items under his belt. So good recognition from the Olympus bolts.
The Valhalla Valkyries, despite that, still maintaining that 1,000 gold lead. We have seen these moments, haven't we, from the Valkyries, and we'll see what Johnny does here. If Awesome Jake overextends, could be a 3v2. Barracuda could drop down the Fields of Love and said Winds of Shamash used first. Awesome Jake into the Shards of Ice. Fields of Love is down. And Awesome Jake peeling out on himself just a little bit. The dash through from Raffer is going to set up for the airstrike, and Emilito picks up a big kill. And it's so easy for Johnny. He just rotates on in. Awesome. The gold lead somehow shrunk since we talked about it being a 1,000 gold lead. And that was the point I was making. Yeah, look, it's actually trending downward towards the bolts despite a kill there over onto Awesome Jake. That's something we've talked about with this Valkyries team. They found this early pressure, but then converting it into leads has been difficult. Lasbra brutalized onto Johnny. There's a double freeze from Awesome Jake yet again. And Venenu now picks up his 1st kill of the game. And a great ball keeps Zeros right where he's at. And Apple flies on through. The knockup is there from Venenu on the other side. And the Olympus bolts are going to have to chase this one down if they want the kill.
And that is exactly what they're doing. Lasbra jumps in, but misses the Unchains!
Whoa, the strike! Wow! Done. Zeros turns it around, and Lasbra overextends. In this Discordia off to a great start, 2-0-1 for the Valkyries mid.
But despite being 2-0 up against Ven's 1-1, it's equal levels. The neutral objectives, the neutral farm have been going the way of the bolts just about every time. And God, Jake, slow down. These walls are crippling as Barracuda takes a 1v1 up against Emilito, lets him fade away. Now the Olympus bolts have realized where they need to put their pressure. Keep it onto Zeros because, honestly, this is a great start. And Zeros is elected to go for a very expensive build. The bolts still have the opportunity to shut him down.
Haddix now being chased by Ducky and Johnny. It's a blue buff invade. Lasbra's going to make his way to the right-hand side of the map. Could be a 2v2 skirmish here, but the blue buff gets dropped. And so now it's up to the bolts if they want to continue in, try to fight this blue buff, despite it already being taken down by the Valhalla Valkyries. And it looks like Ducky and Johnny will make their way out safely.
Got first blooded this game, but because Jake has been so free with his farm, so generous, if you would, Ven's now benefiting from a lead.
And top net worth in the game for Venenu. Venenu utilizing that benevolence, and now maybe a chance to get a kill on the Zeros, and the wall is perfect. He can't just freeze. He can wall off as well, and Awesome Jake sets up another kill, though Venenu doing a lot of the legwork there. That means an immediate call onto the Gold Fury now for the Olympus bolts. Raffer is close by, but the wall will get used to try to slow down Haddix, but it's not going to work. Instead, the root will get used. And now the Olympus bolts grab the Gold Fury for themselves. They're in a kill deficit, but they've brought this game right back to even.
And Ducky on the other side of the map is at least able to strip away a blue buff. I thought we might see the Valhalla Valkyries head over towards the Pyromancer, but not an option.
It's another good wall from Awesome Jake. The Ragnarok gets used on the Rapper. Plenty of tankiness, though, Miff. It's a good eye there as the Terror will dash away and nearly no damage connects. Rapper actually might be full HP here. So just a little skirmish for the Bolt. See if they can get something on the back end of that Gold Fury. Really, the only worrying trend right now seems to be that Ducky's continued to roll this lane over in the solo lane.
And it's not even that bad. Ducky's rolling the lane, but he isn't extending that lead to the rest of the map. Haddix might be behind, but he was present for the Gold Fury. He was ready to put up a fight and just defend his position, allow his team to take that objective. The Valhalla Valkyries right now are not playing around their leads. They haven't rotated anyone over to this solo.
The good news is there are still level leads for the Valhalla Valkyries.
Hey, there it is.
On other lanes of the map. Yeah, you just got to do this. You got to punish Jake because we know that this happens sometimes. Jake will every once in a while get caught out on this pick. Now 0-3-3 on the Ymir. Pyromancer will get secured here by the Valkyries unless Haddix has something to say
They don't
about
know
it.
where to push their leads, but already you can see from the grouping on the map, how they're moving around, they are looking to play as a team right now. This is a very different look at the Valks.
Right, there was a concern that they weren't playing around their leads, and then over the Pyromancer they do. Unfortunately, Rapper, no escape from this one. Enough chain CC, so both supports in the last couple of minutes. 4 out of 6 kill participation for the mid laner. Johnny, though, holds the crown on kill participation right now at 5. I'm wondering if Jake and Lasber are going to try to tier 1 tower dive this Jing way. There are beads, there is an Aegis, there's also an airstrike. Lasber leaps over the wall, knock up onto Laz. The wall from Awesome Jake forces Emilito off to the side, but there's nearly no damage going into Emil. Now the Aegis gets used. Barracuda looking for the stun on the other end. An airstrike waits out that detonate damage, and Emilito survives.
Emilito plays that so well. If he panic airstrikes early, Jake would have walled it off. Immediately the chase down would have been there. Instead, digs in his heels, fights until the very last second, waits for the heart bomb to connect, pops the Aegis, and then finally utilizes that movement ability.
Now it could be exchanged. Tier 1 tower dies. Lazar transforms at the perfect time. The Ragnarok gets used for the CC immunity, but he's got nothing else. Johnny picks up the kill underneath the tier 1 tower. Emilito, he's got nothing left in this fight, but he's stuck around. He's low health, but he's swinging away onto Barracuda as Johnny underneath the tier 1 tower as well. Zeros has joined the fight from the mid lane, and the Apple will be just shy of connecting on any of the Olympus bolts, but still in the back line, it's Johnny running him down. But Anu, though, able to find some damage, and it's Emilito who takes a tumble.
Valhalla Valkyries stick around in this engagement a little bit too long. Johnny is able to make his way over the wall and should be able to escape out of this one. If Ven can't connect his third ability, there's not a lot of chase potential here. Valhalla Valkyries, man, that was a clean dive. Raffer trades off the tower aggro with his ADC. Just tools to chase out what is a largely immobile god like Morgan Le Fay. So, despite Venen being about 2 levels up, maybe about a level and a half, it's not such an insurmountable lead as long as the Valkyries keep their heads on a swivel and are ready for it inside the 5v5.
Right, the counterpoint to that is that Johnny is 2 levels up over Lasper, so both teams playing with a 2-level advantage in one of their roles. This is a big Fury fight here. It's the Oni Fury, so not wildly impactful at this state of the game, but important for some gold and maybe a team fight on the other end. Looks like the teams are going to slow play this one. The Bolts won't be able to sneak it away if the Valkyries leave. But instead, Bolts may be looking towards mid lane. But I think smart here from Johnny to play a bit further back, not get picked out early. Zeros dodges on out the lead from Lasbra, and no engage just yet.
Ducky's going to be the first one in. Johnny drops wins. Here's the fight.
Ducky knocks up the back line, though, of the Olympus Bolts, but he's all alone. He's taking too much damage. He's going to get brought right back into the Lion's Den. Short device will keep Ducky right in place, and Haddix will double down on that effort. But watch out, Awesome Jake. You got to use the wall to stay alive. Haddix finally gets the kill onto Ducky, and for now, it's the only pick.
Haddix has to get punished for this, and Zeros and Rapper do have him locked down, but King Arthur's tanky.
Johnny blinks on in to try to find the kill, but it's a big stun from Haddix to keep himself alive in the fight, and Barracuda turns around the damage. The Olympus Bolts have baited in the Valkyries, and they've made him pay.
3 for 0 so far. Olympus Bolts, the kings of the counter punch, despite not having the sustained advantage. Then finds Rapper on the back end, and the Bolts finally creating some separation in their own favor. 4 for 0, and the Oni Fury.
They're going to get the Fury on the back end, and I'm intrigued at what the Golden XP charts are going to look like after this one. I mentioned that's going to be a big swing here in this game. And a big swing it is. It was 25.
Ven's play has been clinical. It feels like the only way to describe it. Every single one of these engagements, when Ven gets involved, it's because Ven made the decision to get involved. The Valhalla Valkyries have not been able to force the issue onto this Morgan Le Fay. It's always been him engaging.
Wouldn't you guess it? Blink in, double freeze from Awesome Jake. Zeros has to use the beads, and that means it's a perfect target for Lasper and the Ragnarok in the backline. Haddix is the one who grabs the kill. A tier 1 tower falls as well, and it feels like the Olympus Bolts, they've woken up, they've eaten their bread a little bit here, and now the tower's starting to fall. It's a 5K, nearly gold lead for the Bolts. It's going to get a little bit worse if this tier 2 goes down.
And Haddix, who's been struggling all game, now finds himself 1 level in the lead, and with it is able to create so much space again just by standing right here between the tier 2 tower and the Phoenix, is forcing the Valhalla Valkyries to back up. If anyone steps forward, Haddix is going to walk in behind them and find that sandwich of CC between him and the Ymir. There's not much the Valhalla Valkyries could do. Instead, they just have to watch on from a distance as the tier 2 falls.
It feels like a tough game now for Ducky, Johnny, and Emilito. Double sovereignty for the Olympus Bolts here. So it feels like regardless of where Haddix and Jake are playing, there's going to be some extra physical prots stacked on up there. Looking for a route is Raffer here. Ducky's found a knockup, though, on a couple members of the Olympus Bolts. They're going to back away. Barracuda's on the left-hand side of the map, though. This fight, without the ADC on one side, without the mid laner on the others, but Raffer's taken just a bit low, still over half HP, and that means this Terra can re-engage at some point. A stun onto Haddock's middle dash away.
Awesome Jake finds the two-man freeze for the peel, and that should spell the end of it, but Lazarus going in,
Whoa,
finds
it's a big
Emilito.
leap in from Lasburn. Emilito dies on off, and the Olympus Bolts, they found their second wind in yet another fight. Haddock's will pick up Raffer, and the Olympus Bolts find a clean 2-kill swing. 4-1-3 on Haddock's after an 0-1 start.
Shame on me for thinking a fight is gonna fizzle. I think I want the Valkyries to even attempt a Fire Giant play.
I love Ben's player cam right now. You see him laughing, feeling good about himself, and I'm sure the Olympus
4-1-7
have got to feel like they're in the driver's seat of this game, and the Golden XP would absolutely indicate that there as well. That's best case scenario. Barracuda's split pushing over on the left-hand side of the map, and he opens up the left side Phoenix here as well. Fire Giant's half HP, so I'll pause and see if Ducky's going to get range, maybe for a steal. Johnny and Emilito on the other
Great
side.
wall.
The wall from Awesome Jake might block off the steal, and it does. Venenu on a rampage now as Emilito eats the damage. It's a double freeze from Awesome Jake, and Barracuda's on a killing spree as well. Haddock chops down zeros in the backline. Another rampage for the Olympus Bolts. Raffer, the last one alive, he'll waltz away, and Myth could be twilighting here in game one.
Look, the Valhalla Valkyries clearly came to play here today. They were pushing the issue. They were controlling parts of the early game, but you cannot allow the Olympus Bolts to make it to this portion of the match. They are the best team fighters inside the league right now. In Season 7, you could have said it was Sanguine. I think that Bolts are showing shades of Sanguine here because once they're grouped up as 5, it feels like they just work so well as a unit that they're nigh unstoppable between the front line of Jake and Haddox and this clean execution clinical backline of Ven and Barracuda. What are you going to do about it? There's not much.
I think that now it's more about them trying to just kind of grab everything together and look to work as one cohesive unit.
And you had highlighted a couple of problem children, I guess, that the Bolts were going to have and cause trouble with for the Valkyries. This was maybe the biggest one. Venenu was able to have just a field day. Of course, it wasn't just him alone. Haddox as well really started to pick up the pace towards the latter half of the game.
Yeah, Haddox on this King Arthur was just able to create so much space and control there for Lasbra. Even Awesome Jake on the back end, able to kind of sneak by, which you don't really see too often from Amir, looking for those flank opportunities, but the walls were as strong as ever. And again, while it seemed to be a theme surrounding counter-initiation here for the Valhalla Valkyries, in a way, a lot of that AoE tend to work against them because of the likes of that Fields of Love, because of the Shards of Ice from Awesome Jake as well. It was just a very problematic matchup, I think, for these two compositions. And the Valkyries,
but a good draft always helps. Valks, once again, your first pick team. We'll see if they can go for it. They banned out the Odin, the Umoja, and the Tiamat away from the Bolts last time. We'll see. When it's Valks and Bolts, my mind wants to say Bolks, which is not, one, not a word. I don't know why my mouth wants to go to it, but two, doesn't make any sense. I just don't know why. I want to fuse them. But either way, Taco, I mean, the bans, I would even argue maybe the draft as a whole, as I stay on topic, didn't feel bad from the Valkyries. It just maybe didn't do what it needed to, like you said, in the 5-on-5.
Well, the Olympus Bolts, they're not hesitating in the slightest as far as what they don't want to see the Valhalla Valkyries piloting, and it's actually going to be the Morgan Le Fay, so a possibility, I believe, for Tiamat to actually wind up in Zero's hands, whether or not he feels comfortable with that pick, given the ping disparities he's been having to operate with. But it doesn't matter, because one thing's for sure, you cannot afford to let Venenu have this pick option, so it'll be Tiamat as the first selection choice out of the Valhalla Valkyries. But again, this does leave open some relatively strong response options here, and Gilgamesh going to be the first one locked in. There's a possibility that we see Jake look to revisit that Amir. Fafnir still up for grabs, same thing for the Fenrir. A lot, I think, could be said in terms of the establishment of the front line, and it will be the Amir here for Awesome Jake.
Yeah, you call it and they see it and match it. The thing that's interesting to me here, Gilgamesh Amir, very, very successful for the Bolts in what we have seen. Tiamat, 0 for 3. Every game that Zeros has gotten her here for the Valkyries hasn't gone their way. Like you said, Ping maybe not necessarily being as friendly to Tiamat as he would like. But it's going to be the Loki plus the Terra. And look, Terra Loki. I'm saying the wrong combos each time. It's Terra and Tiamat, the two that I'm trying to shrug away. It's the Loki that stands out to me the most because he's the one that was kind of the shining light for the Valkyries in the beginning of Phase 1.
But as Loki could have a little bit more issues here, Gore, when trying to deal with the likes of that Winds of Shamash. Even the Amir ultimates and the walls are definitely going to be strong cutoff opportunities here for the Bolts to kind of stop Johnny in his tracks. Not only that, but Serket, I think, an excellent god in terms of counteracting what it is that Loki loves doing best. Loki loves looking for those flank opportunities. He loves looking to be that clean-up component in a composition, and I'm just not sold on how useful that's actually going to pan out here for the Valhalla Valkyries, given how much mobility is behind this Serket, on top of the fact that Lasbra also has the flex option now to build a little bit more tanky even to just further enhance this front line out of the Bolts.
Well, the Bolts lock in a Serket alongside this Gilgamesh, which is maybe throwing things for a loop. With Ymir up there, normally I'd see Serket Gilgamesh and I'd say, well, Serket support, obviously. Gilgamesh belongs in the jungle. Now I see Ymir, Serket, and Gilgamesh. Is that going to be Lasbra taking the Serket, Jake for the Ymir, and Gilga going solo?
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense to have Haddix on the Gilgamesh and Lasbra with the Serket, because I just think that the Amir and Serket alone is such strong crowd control that it's going to be very problematic for Johnny to basically try and work his way into that backline, because even if he does find a successful ultimate, he's still going to have to actually try and close on the pick, and Serket taunt, you've got Amir freeze, you've got Amir slows. It's just so much chaos, and that seems to be the main issue for the Valhalla Valkyries throughout a lot of their sets. Even when they get picks that they prefer, they're not necessarily getting a chance to operate them in the manner of which you would prefer.
Well, the Bolts, they banned out that Cucullin, they banned out the Wukong to try and limit the matchups there for the Gilgamesh. The other side, it's the Morgan, it's the Baba Yaga. And Bara obviously liked this Cupid, treated him pretty well at the very beginning of the game, treated him well throughout the entirety of game number 1, and he goes right back to it. The Valkyries get to choose their matchup. Last game it was Jing Wei. I feel like Bara's confident that nothing's going to take him on.
Don't think that the Cupid is really meant to be the winning in the 1v1 sort of scenario. What we saw Bara doing a lot of in game 1 was really just looking to control the frontline components from the Valhalla Valkyries throughout a lot of those teamfight engagements. I think Fields of Love, certainly one of the better cutoff options when dealing with the likes of a Terra. And now this
in game number 1. So in game 2, they're going to run back the same exact duo lane that they got there in game 1. Bit of a pivot, though, for the Valkyries. It's a Chiron instead for Emilito.
Yeah, Chiron is still one of the more aggressive gods here in Smite, so I'm expecting Emilito to try and bring a little bit of what he was bringing in the early game last time around, and I really do like this Chiron matchup into Ymir. If Ymir ever looks to just freeze out Raffer, the training exercise can act as a cleanse, and then immediately you want to turn that one around, giddy up, chase him out, and try and shut down Jake before he hits the ground running. That said, though, it is a very high aggression lane from the Olympus Bulls. Between Cupid and Ymir together, that is a ton of kill pressure.
And all right, we got here early enough, and Taco gave us, I guess, a little info on the desk there. It is
about the 1970s?
Right, about the 1970s, but also what starter item Zeros might be looking for through and through. But Ducky had a great laning phase and already starting off pretty well into this Gilgamesh. Reach level 5,
Jeez.
Plenty of damage over onto Haddix. Could be a solo kill there if the cavalry charge falls up. Instead over here, Emilito gets stunned down by Awesome Jake and Barracuda. Raffer doing his best to block the autos, and he's able to do so. Gets himself beneath the tier 1 tower, but now over here on the right-hand side, Ducky taken low by Haddix as well. Haddix survives, Myth, this time maybe only because Lasbra was close by.
But Lazarus taking up so much of that farm.
Team at matchup, though, in the mid lane. We can confirm now that both opted for the tier 2 item to start off. Both mid laners have now completed that item, and then Benevolence picked up for both mid laners as well.
I'm not sure that either one of them is going to have a whole ton of pressure on each other. I mean, as far as wave clear goes, they both should be largely equal, their ability to keep the wave outside the tower. Instead, it's more so about scaling into the late game, and both have incredibly strong.
I mentioned Lasbra needing to follow up on the pressure, and that's exactly what he's done here. He sent Raffer right back to the wayside. There's way too many circles detonating around him, and Awesome Jake picks up first blood for the Olympus Bolts. Not much Raffer can do there.
Survivability in the late game once he gets a couple more levels into Earther and Fury, but until then,
Watch
he
out for
essentially
Johnny.
has to use the beads.
Johnny's on the left side of the map here. Awesome Jake nearly gets the kill on Emilito. In fact, he does.
The heals.
Johnny's got to chase this one down, but Barracuda drops some heals down for his support. Raffer's going to rotate into this one as well. Awesome Jake avoids damage for long enough to blink away, but Barracuda's detonated by zeros. And finally, the Valhalla Valkyries have some life in game 2.
You know, Jake put Johnny's ankles in 17 pieces across the battleground, and Barracuda got kind of crossed up there as well. Wasn't able to escape out, but what are the bolts doing on the map? They're stripping away the tier 1 tower, and that is a lot of free range around these neutral objectives.
This could be good. It's a cavalry charge towards Venenu, who does a lot of damage to Ducky. Will
Separate.
Raffer find the lockdown? No, he won't. Instead, Lasbra is going to use the ultimate, but Johnny answers in turn and chases Lasbra right beneath the tier 1 tower. Nearly enough damage from Ven, but there's some healing off from Ducky on the other side, and it looks like Johnny will survive. Valhalla Valkyries even up the kill. The way the Valkyries now have to pivot and play around that will be interesting, and the Olympus Bolts are going to continue to build on this gold lead that they've set up for themselves. Gold Fury down, beneath half HP. Raffer the only one in what could be range, but he won't end up closing that gap, so the Olympus Bolts quietly take away the Gold Fury. They're for Ducky. Both junglers considering a rotation in. I think you have to sense that there's some jungle pressure in just by the way the solo laners are playing on either side. Now some pings will drop down. Awesome Jake makes a rotation in as well. Venenu is also there, so the Olympus Bolts will have an immediate numbers advantage if any lockdown is to be found. But Ducky and Johnny able to back away beneath the tier 1 tower, safe enough. A root finds its way onto Venenu, who will sustain on up thanks to the item build so far. Raffer uses the bead.
Great wall.
Ultimate goes down as well. Awesome Jake leaves himself walled up, but he hasn't taken that much damage in return. Now it's about the bolts kiting backwards and finding damage on the back line of the fight. Lasbra has taunted a couple, and an ultimate goes onto Ducky as well, but there's somehow no kills in the fight just yet. But a leap back through, and the detonation from Venenu gets the first.
And Jake again with another phenomenal wall. He is dictating the pace of these engagements. Ven was deep out of position there. To separate, sure, a great escape tool, but takes a lot of time to channel and was not given the opportunity, so Jake says, all right, I'm going to drop my wall. Worst case, I die. Best case, I can stick around inside the engagement, and he's already
ban phases, but awesome Jake just takes games over, and right now, yeah, it's 2-0-2, 100% kill participation. He's got half of those kills in his own back pocket. He'll find a freeze on a Raffer. A Fields of Love is there on the follow-up. And the silence will keep him in place. The wall just for an insurance policy on the other side. And Lasbra picks up the 5th of the game for the Bolts.
And again, that's Jake picking the fight. He knows.
Throughout this point in the game, tier 1 tower on right for the Bolts is actually the one that's closer to going down. So Ducky's felt okay in that lane as we expected he might.
He's doing it again.
On the Guan Yu. Shards of Ice locks down Emilito, but the gallop on away and an ultimate on the back end could save his life. Lasbra picks the kill. Emilito no chance to use the ult. And the Olympus Bolts
why? The Valhalla Valkyries have not had an opportunity to play their own game.
I'm sorry, every once in a while you have to laugh, though, when a team support is playing so well they're 3rd on the net worth charts. Awesome Jake is
3-man freeze
than everyone on the Valkyries, and a 3-man freeze is why. A wall will lock off 2 of the 3. Raffer tanky enough and far away enough to survive, but Emilito on the other end of this ultimate will take a tumble. It's only a matter of who, and Venenu is that who.
Olympus Bolts, man. All you could do is say their name at this point, and I guess you could just keep saying Jake's name because he is the one dictating the majority of this pace, but this lead already is starting to balloon out of control. Raffer has to go for this steal.
Yeah, and if he gets it, it's a lifeline, but doesn't get it. The Olympus Bolts will take down the Oni Fury.
Exposed, so 2 win conditions exposed for the Olympus Bolts, and it's an early Fire Giant, but I think it's a good call nonetheless. Valhalla Valkyries forced to answer a hard question.
Given the pace and how far ahead the Bolts are, it might feel like a late FG, all things considered. Ducky will use the cavalry charge, but instead it goes into the Olympus Bolts. No safety there. Haddix now with his 2nd of the game. Fire Giant pulled off by the Olympus Bolts, or pulled by the Olympus Bolts. Nobody else from the Valhalla Valkyries in range. That means a free tier 1 to the Valkyries. And in reality, Miff, that's about the best you can do, right? You're not going to win a fight against the Bolts under the FG. You got to get some guaranteed gold, and maybe that's the tier 1 tower.
You got to at least hope for a tier 2 tower as well, but with Lasbra already there and Haddix stopping Johnny's rotation,
nice
that could be the end of it, but spots him out. Johnny's not very fast. Might be forced to use the Assassinate here.
Over the wall goes Johnny. Wins the Shamash on the other end, though. Johnny uses his beads here. The chase goes on. Haddix doesn't want to let this one go quietly. Has blink in 1 second. Will use the blink, but it's exchanged out by Johnny. And the Phoenix is no worry for this Gilgamesh. He'll join the rest of the Olympus Bolts. 5 strong with FG on the right side. Phoenix Lasbro 1v1 against Tannehill and gets that one with ease.
He does, and Barracuda picks up Ducky, and this is looking pretty close to it.
If we are 18 minutes in here, 2 members of the Valkyries are dead for 35 seconds or so, and all 5 members of the Bolts have FG. Only 4 of them are here on the base push, though. And so the Olympus Bolts will take a deep breath. Neither mid nor left side wave are pushing in. That means the Bolts are going to go fishing for some more kills here. Johnny, the last member of the Valhalla Valkyries, left outside of the base at the moment. Does have a 1-level lead over Lasbro, so small wins, I guess, for the Valhalla Valkyries.
They're
but
small.
You're not going to be winning underneath the mid lane Phoenix, because that one's going to fall down as well.
4-man Earthern Fury does not change that fight whatsoever. Ven just putting in a little bit of damage as Emilito and Ducky are on the respawn, but Laz wants more.
He takes a little burst of damage from Zeros, but more tickles Lasbro than anything else.
Even Lasbro, even though Lasbro is pretty tanky at this point already, that could open up the door for Johnny and Ducky to look to just one-shot somebody, and that is one way back in, but easier said than done.
Feels like Johnny's the only one who's been able to get out of base and somewhat safely farm. He's reached level 20, 4 levels ahead of Lasbro, so Loki's got to get something going here for the Valhalla Valkyries under the left side Phoenix. Emilito just ticked down thanks to the oboe in the back line. Half HP as Lasbro dives back in, finds a ton, but Awesome Jake blinks in, finds a double freeze. There's Johnny, finds the opening kill of the fight, and Emilito goes down first. Ducky dashes on away from this one, so a bit of a fight being put up, but Johnny gets put down, and Awesome Jake adds another.
Ducky, the last one left standing inside the engagement, and gets put down pretty promptly as well. Zeros and Rapper now, the last remaining of the members of the Valkyries.
The Olympus Bolts still 4 strong. They don't have Barracuda, but they've got Awesome Jake. And that's maybe all the Olympus Bolts need.
No.
Rapper not able to get back to the fountain. The wall is there as well, but Rapper sustains himself back up. Watch out, Awesome Jake might die to the Titan for the only time this game, but now the Bolts, with all the gold lead and all the XP in the world, are going to turn their eyes towards the Titan, and the last bit of damage could flow through here, but the Valhalla Valkyries putting up a valiant defense, but it is not up in the Olympus Bolts. When they choose, will end up taking down the Titan, take game 2, take the set, and they'll beat every single team in a row here at the start of phase 2.
From
all
minutes,
the objective gameplay imaginable, and I think a lot of it just starts with some of these early game buff invades. Just not a whole lot that the Valhalla Valkyries could really do in order to try and prevent this sort of collapse. Chiron kind of just gobbled alive by the likes of Amir.
Yeah, Jake just kind of ran at them and didn't seem to have many qualms about it. And the walls, look, the walls are just beautiful. Maybe that's the interview for post game should just be how do get good at Ymir wall. That is the question. Those are what we need answered. It feels like it set up so much for them. Lasbro had a great game on the Circuit as well. I mean, realistically, you could choose pretty much anybody on the Bolts this game and highlight them because they just seem to know exactly what to do. To the point where, 17 and a half minutes in, they're up, as you can see, 8-2, but they get all 5 members of the Fire Giant.
Classic bear up, by the way. 50% of the team's deaths for game number 2. Just classic ADC experience.
Just, making sure to keep it on his back. 3-0-9, the
67% participation for the death score there. Valhalla Valkyries absolutely abusing the ADC out there, but Barra kind of doing it to himself, man. He's just there for the participant. You know, like they give every kid like an award for playing in the sport. That was the Bolts roster with Barracuda today. They're like, and I guess our ADC here too. And I think the Bolts' favorite part about it is that Gore, they've already made one trip around the SPL. Yeah. The question is, can they keep the ball rolling here throughout Split 2? Because it's only going to get more difficult as the weeks go on. Gore, have to remember, all of these teams, I think, definitely starting to showcase some of their potential. Even the ones that aren't really sitting at the middle of the pack, that bottom of the leaderboard, as far as the standings are concerned, definitely still ample opportunity, I think, for those teams to bounce back.